Yo, what's up boys? It's Betta here with the next series of build guides / update videos. This time around we are using claws with what I think is the most beautiful skill in the game with MTX, being Spectral Throw on a Deadeye to stack up as much dexterity as possible for the huge flat added damage bonuses and quality of life from the Ascendancy. This is the first of a 5 video series for you to follow along with. Different budgets. For the very first one starting off, you'll only need a maximum of around about 90 chaos. The second one will be around about 3 to 5 divines at most, and then for the third one we're looking at about 10 to 15 divines, and the fourth will be for the end game at around about 50 divines or so. The last video will be the min-max version, including mage blood, which I've already put together and costed me around about 900 divines roughly. This gives you a rough idea of what to expect in terms of progressing the build in terms of budgets. To scale up our damage, we are of course dual wielding Hand of Thought and Motion Claws, which adds 1 to 10 lightning damage to attacks per 10 dexterity, so we get dexterity on every single possible piece of gear to get as much as we can. As we're able to have up to 1000 dexterity, these claws will give us 100 to 1000 base flat lightning damage that we will further scale with increased critical strike chance and multiplier from the skill tree with Nightblade, Inspiration, and critical strike support gems as well. In order for us to dish out many spectral throws in quick succession, we double our attack speed from the skill tree with the claw mastery that we don't need to stack up other forms of attack speed bonuses this early on. Now you may be asking yourself why Deadeye, and Deadeye is the best choice for Ascendancy as we get Gale Force increasing both our action speed and our movement speed alongside giving us the extra attack speed as well. It also gives us free fast shots to deal more damage to enemies at the end of the travel distance of Spectral Throw, and we also gain 2 additional projectiles so we do not have to use lesser multiple or greater multiple projectiles for the extra damage support. And then lastly, focal points for the increased effect of our mark, being Sniper's Mark to dish out even more projectiles and damage. In terms of defense, the build is more of a glass cannon, but you can expect to take a few hits comfortably sometimes, otherwise most times you may end up getting one shot. 100% spell suppression helps mitigate spell hits. We're immune to all ailments, have a decent evade chance of around about 75%, and mostly rely on killing enemies before they kill us is our best form of our defense. For sustain, life gain on hit, life recovery on kill do help out a lot while mapping, but also for bossing in terms of the life gain on hit. Do just note that you can't go balls to the wall and expect to face tank everything with this build. Content wise, you can do all T16 mapping on this early budget, early guardians, and even early endgame bosses. Just expect to die if you aren't careful with your character's placement. This build is more of a mapper, even with the later on budgets, but bossing can be done pretty comfortably should you be really familiar with the bossing mechanics. And should you need help or have questions with the build, please do join my community Discord or maybe pop into my live streams. I am live daily on Twitch, and you can find all of the necessary links down below in the description, including the path of building. In terms of leveling the build through the acts, it is actually really easy using the Spectral Wolves tech and that. So this league, you can expect to get to your early maps by probably maybe the 4-hour mark and that. It is really quickly using the Wolves. But in terms of the skills and that, you will be using Spectral Throw very early on. And then from there on, from around about level 8 or so, you will be using the Wolves on a copper sword over here with the trigger level 10 summon Spectral Wolf on kill, and alongside with that we'll also be using the level 1 envy skill just to bump up our damage and the wolves damage. And then alongside that you'll just be using a couple of other leveling uniques, and that's just to make your leveling experience a little bit quicker. I have got different item sets for your different leveling and everything over here for you. And then alongside with that as well, I've got the same thing in terms of the skill gems and that as well, just to make things a lot more comfortable for you. And then of course, in terms of the skill tree, I have got each act broken down for you, just to make things a lot smoother. That way you do not have to actually struggle. And I have found that pathing this way is the best in terms of getting life in that really early on, as the spectral wolves are carrying you, and you also obtain some extra damage in that as well. So from Act 3, obviously, you'll be picking up Normal Lab, which is going to be Gathering Winds. And then by the time you're getting to around about Act 7, Act 8, you'll pick up Far Shot. And then once you are into Act 10, you'll also then be picking up your Endless Ammunitions for the additional projectiles. Because the wolves' damage typically start to fall off at around about Act 8, it's best that we pick up the additional critical strike chance and multiplier and everything, as this will be much needed getting into your early mapping and that, just to make things way smoother for you. Once you get into your early maps and that, after picking up the additional critical strike chance and everything, you'll path over and get utmost swiftness. This is in order to get much needed dexterity in that. And then you'll be picking up all of the claw nodes for the additional critical strike chance and for the additional attack speed along with that. And then between 78 and 88, we'll just be filling in some other nodes on the tree and getting some much needed strength and intelligence as well. And then moving over, pathing towards level 90, you'll of course be picking up your increased elusive effect, some more multiplier, and multi-shot for an additional projectile, and the monsters cannot block your attacks, along with some additional critical strike multi. Under the notes section over here, I have included everything that you do need in terms of the wolf enchants and what you should be doing once getting to Act 2, which is switching over to putting Essences of Fear for the additional minion damage for our wolves. And then once you're at about 46 to 50, then you can recraft some swords or claws, however you see fit. And I also do just want to note that you do not have to use Spectral Throw while leveling. You can, of course, use Frostblades with Ancestral Call, as this will give you a much greater clear speed in that. However, I do recommend that you use Spectral Throw so you can become comfortable with the playstyle. And not only that, but also so that you can get used to the very edge of where your Spectral Throw will spin to get the most damage done, especially for bossing and that. This will help you understand the skill a lot better. Once you have reached maps and that, should you be an absolute juicer and you have got a mage blood and like 500 or 700 divans or multiple divans just laying around in that, and if you don't want to do the budget version of the build, I have included the path of building of my character that is min-maxed, whereby I spent around about 900 divans total on it, should you want to advance the build directly to the min-maxed version and just skip all of the budgets instead. Included with this, I also have a 5-way tree for you, which just basically picks up as much life as possible in that. That way you will not die in 5 ways, making it more comfortable for you to level. And then obviously, in terms of the items and that, you can just throw on a bunch of increased experience and a whole bunch of items which give you a large amount of chaos resistance. That way you'll be extra tanky during the 5 ways. Alright, moving on over into in-game over here. I'm going to go over the gearing real quick. So obviously we're using Hand of Thought and Motion for both of our claws. This gives us much needed increased percent dexterity, along with some added extra intelligence and the recover life on kill. But most importantly, as I already mentioned, is the increased lightning damage to attacks with this weapon per 10 dexterity. And it also provides us with a little bit of extra critical strike chance with the increased crit chance per 25 intelligence. Moving on over to your helmet, you have to use a Fractal Thoughts for the 15% increased dexterity if strength is higher than intelligence. And as you can see, our strength is higher than our intelligence, so we are gaining that bonus. And then alongside with this as well, we're also gaining an additional 30 to 40% increased critical strike multiplier if dexterity is higher than intelligence. And obviously it is because we're stacking up a lot of dexterity. And then with this as well, we're also gaining the increased elemental damage per 10 dexterity, further scaling our damage even more. And then the additional 2 to maximum life per 10 intelligence. This gives us just a little bit extra life just to bring up our HP pool a little bit more. Moving on to the amulet, we're just using a normal amulet over here with as much dexterity as possible, and it also has added lightning damage to attacks along with a high life roll just to once again bring up our life pool. I do just want to note that these claws were about 3 to 5 chaos only, and the helmet costed me only 5 chaos. The amulet, I think I paid, it was around about 7 chaos, if I'm not mistaken. And I also just do want to note here that all of these gear pieces I bought were all from listings from like a month ago and that, just to prove that you can actually league start this build and that, and it will be perfectly fine. Obviously, it does depend on which league and on the listing prices and that and so forth. But anyways, moving on to the rings, you'll be using 2 amethyst rings just to bring up our chaos resistance a little bit early on, just to make it a little bit more comfortable. And on your rings, what you need to get is as much dexterity as possible, once again, alongside with any extra elemental resistances and some life if you're able to do so. And then other than that, you need to have the non-channeling skills have -6 to 7 total mana costs. The reason why you need this is so that our Spectral Throws total mana cost is much lower, and that way you're able to dish them out very, very quickly without actually having to worry about mana at all, which just makes mapping and bossing way, way smoother. And that way, once again, you don't need to use clarity or have to worry about your mana sustain at all. Moving on to the boots, once again, you need to have dexterity, any resistances, some movement speed, and a little bit of extra life does go a long way. And then also for your gloves, once again, some more dexterity and flat added lightning damage to attacks, along with a highest life roll possible, and maybe any extra elemental resistances, just so you're able to cap your resistances. And then moving on to the belt, what you need to do is pick up a Stygian Vase, and what you're going to use is Screaming or Shrieking Essences of Sorrow for the dexterity. The reason why I would recommend using the essences is because there aren't really many of these belts on the market currently with the dexterity roll, and basically you're just going to use a couple of these until you hit a decent life roll, along with maybe any extra elemental resistances, and then craft on the increased elemental damage with attack skills should there be an open prefix. But if there isn't, you don't have to stress about it. And then for your body armor, I would recommend picking up any base that's got armor and evasion, just to help out on the defensive side of the build just a little bit extra. And then along with this, you should have dexterity on it once again, and any extra life, along with any elemental resistances too, once again, just to cap off your resistances. And I also do just want to note that you need to have 2 reds, 2 blue, and 2 green. Typically, this could be a bit difficult to land. So if you do pick up any other base with these colors and that, do not worry. All you have to make sure is that you've got evasion on the body armor. I think I picked up the body armor for, it was 25 chaos or so. You could probably get one for much cheaper. The gloves I paid 10 chaos for, and the boots was also about 5 or 7 chaos, if I remember correctly. And then the belt, I think, took me about 5 to 10 essences to hit. So the base was 5 chaos. So I guess you can estimate that it's around about 15, maybe 20 chaos to hit it. And if you're unlucky, it could be more, but it is pretty easy to hit a decent life roll in terms of using the essences. Moving on to the skill gems and your links real quick over here. So obviously we're using Spectral Throw with Nightblade support for the elusive chance, the additional critical strike chance and multiplier that it supplies us with. And then with that, we're also using lightning penetration, as we do have a lot of lightning damage. This does help boost our damage significantly. And then obviously along with that, we're using inspiration for the less mana cost, which goes hand in hand with our ring crafts, and the additional more elemental damage and increased critical strike chance that it provides us with. And then for your 5th link, you're looking at using increased critical strikes, once again for the increased critical strike chance, just to get our critical strike chance as high as possible. As you can see, we're on about 72%, and then flasked up, we can hit easily 85%, and then with our inspiration charges, we're almost at 90%, so that way we're dealing as many critical strikes as possible. And then for the very last link, you must use volatility. The reason why we use volatility is because naturally our lightning damage has a low to a high roll, so this helps us gain a significant boost to our overall damage as we're gaining more maximum attack damage and less minimum attack damage, which doesn't hurt us too much, once again because we are lightning damage based. And then in the claw, we're just using Sniper's Mark once again for the increased projectile damage, the additional 2 projectiles that we gain from it with Mark on hit. And then we're using Life Tap. This way we don't have to worry about any mana cost issues. And then in the helmets, I'm just using a level 1 precision, just as a filler for the time being. And then our trustworthy Grace Aura for the more evasion and the additional flat evasion that it provides us with. And then Purity of Elements, once again, just to cap off our resistances and so that we're immune to all ailments. This way you don't have to stress about any ailment immunities in that early on. And then we're also using a flame wall. The reason why we use a flame wall is because all of our projectiles that pass through the flame wall will gain additional damage. This just helps out us with our overall damage. And then of course we're using Blood Rage for the frenzy charge on kill and the additional attack speed that it provides us with. And then in the boots, I'm just using Steel Skin along with automation, so it's automatically used for us, whereby we can mitigate a small amount of damage, and it also gives us immunity to bleeding. That way you don't have to worry about being bled. But in terms of bleeding as well, you should get immune to corrupted blood on your life flask. This way you're able to remove it really, really easily. Or you could just pick up a immune to corrupted blood jewel. They are very, very cheap, but I opted to do it this way very early on. And then in the boots, I'm also using a Cast on Death portal. The reason why I do recommend to use this is because you will end up dying a few times in that, and running all the way through the map to get back to where you were after dying can be really, really frustrating. So this just makes it much, much easier on you. And then in the gloves, I'm just using Whirling Blades with faster attacks. This is just so you can get around much quicker, making the build a lot more speedy, and so you can get out of the way so you don't get killed by obvious things. And then I'm using a Tornado linked to Culling Strike as well. This is just for the additional damage and mostly for bossing and that, so you can easily cull them. Just to make sure that your flame wall is up and the tornado goes through, so you can stack up all of your projectile damage onto the tornado just for the additional damage that it will provide you with. Alright, moving on to our flasks real quick. Obviously, you should use a Quicksilver flask for the movement speed, and a Onslaught flask for some more speed and attack speed, obviously, and then a Jade flask for the increased evasion rating that it provides you with, and then a Diamond flask for the increased critical strike chance, once again, just to bring our critical strike chance up even more, so we can get closer to that nice 90% juicy critical strike chance. And then obviously on your flasks, on at least one of them, you should have reduced effective curses on you, increased critical strike chance, increased evasion rating, and increased movement speed. And then if you can, on your flasks, I would recommend to get the prefix modifier to gain a flask charge when you deal a critical strike chance. This is just so that your uptime on your flasks are much easier, but it's not really 100% necessary. You should still be fine, but it is probably best to do this, especially for bossing and that. However, with this early budget and that, you won't be doing that much bossing, as the character is more of a mapper, as I did mention in the beginning of the video. One thing I do just quickly want to note is that you can use a Granite Flask instead of using a Silver Flask for the Onslaught, just so you can bring up your armor an additional amount, just in case if you find yourself to be too much of a glass cannon and you would like to be just a little bit more tanky, you can do this. And then obviously, instead of using a Life Flask, you can opt for using a Tincture for the increased elemental damage with melee weapons, and melee weapon damage penetrates the elemental resistances as well to further bring up your damage even more. Just do note that you will be susceptible to dying to the corrupted blood and that, but as I did mention, you can just get that on a duel. Alright, and in terms of your Pantheon, I recommend using Soul of the Brine King, so that way you cannot be stun locked. It just makes things a lot smoother for you. And then obviously for the mana, I recommend using Shikari. This way poisons cannot really kill you, as your chaos resistance is not really that high. This does make it a lot easier, but should you be using the tincture and that, you can opt for using Rollekesh as well. Just make sure that you're capturing Drek, the Apex Hunter. That way corrupted blood can only be inflicted on you 5 times. This will just make it a lot more smoother, but obviously using the corrupted blood jewel once again is just a much better fallback option here, as they are really cheap. Alright, and that is it for the very first update slash build guide video. Remember that there will be another 4 more coming out, so do stay tuned. Should you have enjoyed the video, please do drop a like on it, and also consider subscribing to my channel if you're not yet subscribed. And remember that every single day I will be live over on Twitch, so do come tune in. It is always a fun time. Other than that, boys, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video or live stream.